Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the White House. My name is Ramana Ahmed, and I lead the White House Champions of Change program, and I'm here on behalf of the Office of Public Engagement. We've been looking to have this event and bring you all here today on this important topic on gun violence prevention, and yesterday's events further reinforce why we are here. As the families of Fort Hood face yet another heartbreaking tragedy, our thoughts and prayers are with them. But we're reminded once again, as we've been reminded one too many times at this point, of why we're here today and why we need to continue to do what those of us in this room are already doing to fight gun violence, and have others to do the same and join us in this effort. We've heard the president say it time and time again that change happens from outside of Washington. And that's why the Champions of Change program was created in 2011 after the president's State of the Union address, because he really wanted to be able to recognize and lift up the stories of ordinary, everyday Americans doing extraordinary things in their community to lead change by out-educating, out-innovating, and out-building our communities to be stronger, more prosperous, and safer. As we all know, addressing and solving any issue requires leadership, vision, collaboration, and persistence, especially when we face the disappointing shortcomings when it comes to congressional action, which in the case of gun violence has unfortunately been the case. Addressing the issue also requires lifting up and learning from individuals like our champions here today, as well as you all as community leaders, as well as national leaders who are fighting to establish a safer life, a life that means living free of the fear of gun violence. So I do want to encourage everyone who's here in the audience today, as well as who's joining us through live stream, to help us lift up the stories of our champions who are here with us today, to share your story and the importance of this issue by using hashtag WHChamps and hashtag ActForOurKids. We do want to be able to lift up these stories so that other people can use these stories as examples and replicate what you all are doing out there on the grounds as well. I'd like to now introduce to you someone who shares the same deep passion for all the work that you are doing and this specific issue as it is to the president. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in introducing and welcoming Senior Advisor to the President, Valerie Jarrett.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. We are just so honored to have all of you here today. Of course, most especially our champions. And this is of our many initiatives that we have at the White House. I think one of the ones that I enjoy the most is where we have the opportunity to recognize ordinary citizens who are doing absolutely extraordinary things. And in the space of trying to figure out what we're going to do to end gun violence, your work is so vitally important. So I want to begin by having our champions stand up and let us give you all a round of applause. Thank you. Each and every one of these champions have been right there fighting, putting their heart, their soul, everything on the line, trying to make their community safer. Many of them have experienced extraordinary pain of having loved ones killed, and through that grief they have found the strength to try to make sure that no other family has to go through the loss that they have gone through. And as a mom, as I have gotten to know several of these folks from around the country who have experienced this amazing, excruciating loss, I am just so humbled by that inner strength and that sense of responsibility to our community. And as a mom, there is no greater pain that anyone can experience than the loss of a child. And to overcome that grief and to honor your children in the way that so many of you have done is just such a symbol for our country. So I just thank you on behalf of what I know is an extremely grateful nation. So many of the rest of you who are here today have been right there working hand in glove at the local level, where really the difference is going to have to come. We fought a really good battle to try to get sensible gun legislation, and I know how disappointed all of you were when Congress did not act. But we have not given up, and we are going to take our fight to the states. And that's what so many of you have done. And we are confident that change really happens from the ground up. And when 90% of the American people support something, you would think Congress would act. But in this case, they didn't. And so we'll just take it city by city, state by state. And we have so many examples of people, law enforcement on the ground, making a difference right there in city by city. We have wonderful examples of change that's happening. And we're just going to keep pushing until Congress does the right thing as well. We're not going to stop. We're not going to tire. We're not going to grow weary. And I think as Mark said to me last time he was in, we have no choice. This is what we're going to have to do. But there is a lot that we have accomplished. I know everyone here is aware of the 23 executive orders that President Obama signed, and we are fully on our way to implementing each and every one of those. And we are always interested in ideas for what more we can do at the federal level. We are going to be your partner in this every step of the way. We will take whatever actions we can at the executive level, but it is really in the partnerships that we have with each of you and your ability to touch the hearts of so many Americans around our country where change really occurs. So, in the midst of what happened yesterday at Fort Hood, it requires us to dig just a little bit deeper. There are reminders all over our country every single day of families who experience needless loss because their loved ones are killed. And we're just going to fight it. We're just going to keep at it. We're going to keep at it. And we're going to keep our spirit strong. And one way to keep that spirit strong is to really recognize those folks who have made this enormous contribution to this effort. So it's extraordinarily painful, I know, but it also is symbolic of what is great about our country, that we don't give up, that we don't grow weary, that we keep focused and we keep dedicated to this really important cause. So thank you all. I really appreciate it so much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Jarrett, for that. I now have the pleasure of introducing Lise Clavel, the Special Assistant to the President and Director of Public Engagement for the Vice President. Lise started just a year ago and joined the Vice President's team to take over the gun violence portfolio, which has been a key part of what the Vice President has really put his heart into. And although he wasn't able to join us today, unfortunately, he does have Lise here with us, who has made this a personal passion of herself as well, too. So please join me in welcoming Lise Clavel.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Romana, and thank you, everybody, for coming, and special thanks, of course, and congratulations to our 9 wonderful champions who are here today. I'm so happy to see all of you here. Our audience traveled from all over, from Connecticut, Texas, Arizona, and California, from Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Georgia, and several other states in between. We at the White House are always thrilled to hear from our partners in the gun violence movement who are outside the Beltway, so thank you for making that trip. As Romana said, the Vice President really regrets that he's not able to be here today, and he sends his congratulations and his blessings to everybody who's here, and he's really glad that we're convening this group of you to talk about this crucial issue of gun violence prevention here at the White House today. I'm especially honored to stand up here today with our 9 champions of change, who are leaders in their communities on this issue and models for change everywhere. In some ways, one could say it is tragically fitting that the White House is honoring these leaders the morning after yet another shooting at Fort Hood. But the fact is that every day is a day after gun deaths have happened somewhere in this country. By some counts, an average of 18 gun deaths happen every day in the US, and we know that in certain places the concentration is even higher than others. All our champions today are working to reduce that number, to save lives, to make our schools and communities safe places for everyone, and to pass common sense gun legislation in their states and someday at the federal level. You'll hear from our champions in just a few minutes, but I'd like to take a minute here to introduce them to you. And as I say your name and introduce you, would you please stand up so that everybody can recognize you before we begin? So first meet Chief Jim Johnson. Chief of Police of Baltimore County, and Chair of the National Law Enforcement Partnership to Prevent Gun Violence. Chief Johnson works every day in his jurisdiction to reduce gun violence and to make his community safer. He also was instrumental in changing the laws in Maryland to prohibit assault weapons and to limit high-capacity ammunition magazines. Thank you for being here with us today. Meet Jamira Burley, Executive Director for the City of Philadelphia Youth Commission. Jamira's brother was shot and killed in 2005, and she's worked since then on local and national initiatives to engage youth in eliminating gun violence and helping create safer living and learning environments for young people like her. Next, meet Reverend Glenn Garrett Grayson, pastor of Wesley Center AME Zion Church in Pittsburgh. In 2000, Reverend Grayson founded the Center That Cares, which serves over 125 families from pre-K to college with tutoring and enrichment programs, and which continues to promote a gun violence prevention initiative and to prepare youth to be leaders in their communities. Thanks for being here. Meet Nosheen Haidari. Nosheen is a crisis therapist for the Emergency Services On-Call team at Community Counseling Centers of Chicago. C4 treats more than 10,000 low-income children and adults each year. Nosheen provides crisis assessments for these patients who are in severe psychiatric distress, often because they are victims or perpetrators of violent acts. Next, meet Sarah Clemens. Sarah is the founder and chair of Junior Newtown Action Alliance. She's a senior at Newtown High School in Newtown, Connecticut. On December 14th, 2012, her mother, who was teaching at Newtown High School, survived the shooting. And out of this terrifying experience, Sarah became involved and committed to gun violence prevention advocacy and now works with other millennials to address gun violence in every type of community through both legislative action and cultural change. Next, we meet Dr. John Woods. Dr. Woods, though he now lives in West Virginia, is a Texas violence prevention advocate and just got back from Austin last week. John graduated from Virginia Tech in May 2007, just weeks after the mass shooting there. He went to UT Austin for his doctorate in molecular biology, and there he became involved in the Texas gun violence prevention movement, successfully organizing against campus carry bills in 3 legislative sessions. After the shootings in Newtown, he helped found Texas Gun Sense to educate lawmakers and Texans about universal background checks and how it would affect them. Thanks for being here. Next, meet Mark Barden, who's here with his family, who should also stand up. Right here. Mark is Director of Advocacy at Sandy Hook Promise, which I think you all know. He lost his son, Daniel, in the Sandy Hook shooting, and since then has dedicated himself to preventing tragedies like this from happening again and to other families. He has been to a Tea Party town hall in Florida, met with members of Congress, governors, and state legislators. He's introduced President Obama in the Rose Garden in talking about this issue, and has spoken to civic groups, faith groups, and on college campuses and on his work. We're honored to have you here today. Meet Pamela Simon. Pam is a gun violence prevention advocate who survived being shot in the 2011 Tucson shooting while working as community outreach coordinator for Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords. After that event, Pam helped launch the Mayors Against Illegal Guns Demand a Plan initiative that asked candidates in the 2012 presidential election to offer a plan to reduce gun violence. She has spoken out in the news media, at rallies and forums and survivor events, and has worked with numerous groups on gun violence preventions, including Moms Demand Action, Arizonans for Gun Safety, Moms Rising, Organizing for Action, Tucson Community Against Gun Violence, and Americans for Responsible Solutions. Thanks for making the trip here, Pam. Our last champion you won't exactly meet today. Unfortunately, Teresa Crawford was unable to travel from Nevada due to a family emergency, but she'll be on the phone during her panel. She's the Organizing for Action Nevada State Lead for Gun Violence Prevention and a board member of Progress Now Nevada. Teresa has organized rallies, vigils, phone banks, petitions, and press conferences in support of federal and state legislation to address gun violence, and has been a vocal proponent of communities sharing resources to keep their schools and streets safe. We can give her a round of applause, even though she's not here. So we have a really remarkable group of community leaders here, and I hope that during lunch and our breakout sessions and during our breaks, you'll get the chance to talk to them. Of course, you'll hear from them all in depth in just a few minutes. I want to briefly set out some goals for today that I hope you'll keep in mind throughout the panels and throughout the breakout groups this afternoon. We hope that you'll leave the White House today having learned more about this amazing landscape of organizing that gun violence prevention advocates have created across the country. We hope you'll learn more about specific organizations that maybe you've been interested in but haven't looked into yet, and that you'll also find out how you can help legislation pass in a state you've never even traveled to. We ask you to share as much as possible while you're here. Tell us your story and about your work and the tactics that you found work best so that others can learn from you. And lastly, we want everyone here, including us White House staff, to leave here with some new ideas of how best to create a culture where passing sensible gun legislation is possible. Because that's really what I think this is about. We know that over 90% of Americans support a universal background checks law, and we also know that gun owners support such a law at almost the same rate. So the organizing that many of you are doing is focused on getting others as engaged as you are, so that we can create a culture where every single shooting on a Chicago street, in a school, on an Army base, elicits not revulsion just for a few days or weeks after, but a deep and abiding sense that these shootings are unacceptable and that they are preventable and must be stopped. These culture changes take a long time. Passing a health care law took decades. Environmental efforts like the Clean Water Act took years, which I think you all know by now. But I'm not telling you to be patient. I think you have to be impatient. We have to be impatient. We have to be impatient and work together and celebrate our incremental victories, all of which save lives, on the way to saving more lives and protecting more communities from the scourge of gun violence. So thank you to our champions today and to everyone in the audience for what you do every single day to save lives. Let's be impatient and let's get more done. Let's learn from our champions of change. So I'm thrilled today to introduce our first panel moderator, Rohan Patel. Rohan is a special assistant to the president and deputy director of intergovernmental affairs. And could we please also have our first panelists come on stage to take their seats? So that's Mark Barden, Reverend Grayson, Nosheen Haidari, and Chief Johnson. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lise, and thanks everybody for being here today. I want to first of all recognize a real hero and champion here in DC, somebody who's gone through quite a bit over the last few years and who has been a steady hand, Congressman Ron Barber. Thanks for being here. I'm really humbled to be a part of this event and to be sitting on a stage with these champions today. This issue touches everyone at some point. Last year during the Naval Yard shootings, a gentleman by the name of Vishnu Pandit was killed in that rampage. There he's a family friend of ours, but there are not very many people that have more similarities to my father than Vishnu did. He would have been 63 years old, my dad 63 years old. He had 2 sons. My dad had 2 sons, both from India, both engineers, both had 1 granddaughter. And it was a very tough time, I think, for a lot of folks in the Indian community, especially those who had that same kind of experience. So I think this issue certainly touches everyone. I want to jump right in here, and my first question really touches on organizing. You guys have all done some type of organizing, and I think over the last few years, as this issue has come right to the forefront, wondering, how you've learned to talk about this issue, both with your peers and others, and what are the kinds of things that have been successful for you all in terms of the organizing opportunity. So, Mark, maybe we could start with you on that question.
Thanks, Rohan. I think just what you said, talking about it is essential. Awareness, which leads to education and then engagement. I know that regrettably before 12/14/2012, before we lost our sweet little Daniel, before he was killed, we were not engaged in this. I was not aware that 30,000 people were dying every year to gun violence. And you'd hear about a tragedy in a city or in a suburb or a mass shooting, and you would just think, oh my gosh, how horrible. I wish there's something I can do. There's really nothing I can do, and inevitably go back to your life. And I think that is the root of the problem, and I think that's what we need to address. We need people to be aware of what's going on. When people say to me, how do you do this? I don't know how you have the strength to do this. And I've, in the last year and a half, learned too much to not do this. And I know that so many of these deaths are preventable. This is what our life looked like before December 14th, 2012. That's James. He's 13. He's here today. And that's Natalie. She's 12, and she's here today. And that's Daniel, who was 7 when he was killed in his first grade classroom, and he can't be here today. So we are all here today to try to prevent another family from having to live the pain that my family is living. And so many families go through every day, and so many of you have been touched by this. And the truth is, if you haven't been immediately affected by gun violence, you know someone who has, and that's not acceptable. So it does come down to awareness. We need to talk to people. We need to have that conversation. Thankfully, our organization, Sandy Hook Promise, these brilliant minds that I have the privilege to work with, came to this situation with a different viewpoint, with a different attitude about this, and that it's about social change. It's about changing attitudes and behaviors. It's about creating an environment that makes it culturally unacceptable for this gun violence to continue at the rate that it's continuing. And through that community building and that social awareness, the legislation will follow. And I believe that we can do this, and I believe that all these wonderful minds in this room will reach other people to get them engaged.
Thanks so much, Mark. Chief?
Well, I think it's important to stress and point out that law enforcement across the nation is unified on a national background check. And we stand and we will be with you and many others as we continue our efforts to bring this about. I agree with Mark. As a law enforcement officer now for 36 years, perhaps most of that career handling guns on a regular basis, encountering guns and crimes, you never stop to start to peel back the layers of the onion, and you begin to see how ridiculous some of these regulations, rules, lack of laws are contributing to this gun violence. Careless gun safety and careless gun ownership, over and over and over again. The sales and marketing, the strategies to advance assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in our society, the absolutely ridiculous choppy NICS system, the National Instant Criminal Background Check system in this nation. We've made some progress, but we're far from getting this right. The over-restriction of ATF, restricting their ability to control and regulate the industry and the sales. So I agree with Mark. It's about education, it's about informing, it's about announcing to our nation what is taking place and how to stop it. Law enforcement stands with you, and certainly it will help reduce what are 11,000 homicides, 100,000 shootings a year, billions lost as a result of these tragedies. And frankly, many, many law enforcement officers killed, including an officer we lost several months ago in an illegal gun sale. So again, I believe education is the key.
Thanks, Chief. And Reverend, you've been a stalwart in the faith community on this subject. I'm wondering if you could speak to that in terms of how best to talk to your peers and how best to talk to those in your pews about this difficult issue.
Thank you. It's ironic, across from the New Pittsburgh Courier in Pittsburgh, the article of Reverend Grace receiving this award, it also indicates that 15 of 20 homicides in the month of March were African Americans. And I say to people that March Madness has nothing to do with the basketball court. March Madness is when 15 African Americans, 20 people total, 20 young people, 20 people lost their lives senselessly to gun violence. So the Center That Cares continues to advocate prevention. My wife and I have always kind of opened our doors to children and to families. 14 years ago, I saw a need to work with prevention to help young people, to encourage them. And so the Center That Cares came into fruition from a vision of mine. My son, Jerron Xavier Grayson, should be graduating next month from Hampton University. He came home at 18 from first time from college, an innocent kid. I wear his ring from Finley High School, where he was the most valuable player on the football team, winning them a national championship. And so he should be, finishing college. I won't have that experience of him finishing college, him getting married, him giving my wife and I grandchildren. His brother, Garrett, and sister Shanora will never experience that bonding anymore. I concur with Mark. So we continue to advocate prevention as we continue to touch lives. In his memory, we, with the support of the foundation community, are renovating a 14,000 square foot formerly closed community center to be named after Jerron Xavier Grayson, where we continue to touch hundreds and hundreds and thousands of lives over the next few years. So I tell the faith-based community, it could happen to anybody. A gun doesn't have a name on it. My wife's an attorney, I'm a preacher, but a bullet can take a life. Whether you are on public assistance or a millionaire, a gun senselessly can take innocent lives.
Well said, Reverend. Nosheen, you've really worked in Chicago to get to the core of the root causes, and hoping you could explain a little bit about your work and the type of success stories that you've had in organizing and mobilizing.
Absolutely. I work in inner city neighborhoods in Chicago where we're leading the country in homicides. And, for us in the mental health community, the conversation is really about what's going on. Guns are objects, but there's somebody behind a gun. And what is bringing them to the point that they are feeling that is an appropriate way to cope with what is going on internally. And so the work that I do at Community Counseling Centers of Chicago, the work that we do is really to figure out how we can manage the crisis. And the crisis is not just the violent act, it's before that happens. There's a crisis happening inside. And I absolutely agree, Reverend Grayson, we call it March Madness for a very different reason. I know nothing about the brackets, but the numbers skyrocket in Chicago in March. Gangs recruit more in March. There's a lot of unrest year-round. And the conversations that we're having are really about solutions. I agree that the policy has not caught up, and that's hopefully that will eventually, but what do we do now? We are impatient. Like like Lise was saying, we have to be impatient. And so what can we do now? What can everyone do now? At the agency that I work in, the role that I have the privilege to be in, we work in crisis intervention. What's going on for the person when somebody raises their own hand, or when someone around them says, this person is struggling. They have some aggression, they've got depression, they've got anxiety, they've got suicidality, they have homicidality, they are experiencing psychiatric crisis in a way that is internal, and it will manifest externally if we don't do something now. So we get there and figure out how we can safety plan with that person. What are the needs of this person in the crisis moment? We can't wait for all this stuff to catch up in Washington. We gotta be there now in our communities, and in our beloved Chicago, there are a lot of children, a lot of families, a lot of individuals suffering, and we can do something about it, and we can be there for them in a way that is validating. The act of picking up a gun and being a proponent of violence is not the right answer. It's not the right story. But what's going on internally, we always tell our clients there's no right or wrong feeling. Feelings just are. So the reasons that they feel that they need that to cope, those reasons are all valid. And we need to address those and soothe that individual who has unmet needs. And that's what's creating the insecurity. I truly feel this is a human issue. It's happening on the streets of Chicago. It's happening all over the US, it's happening all over the world, and there's something we can do, and we can all have the conversation of how we can be more human with each other in a way that's soothing.
Thanks so much, Nosheen. And you touched on something that I wanted to ask the panel before we open it up for audience Q&A. Mark, folks here, staff here, I know the president and others, were incredibly frustrated and have been incredibly frustrated with the Washington gridlock on this issue. I'm wondering, does that gridlock give you an organizing opportunity? Is there a way to use that gridlock to advance the cause in some way? Nosheen touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if that presents, opportunity is a horrible word, but does that present some kind of an opportunity for you all to organize?
Well, I think it's always been an important and valuable component to this, as Nosheen said, is the early intervention and prevention and identification. I think if we start, I think with Sandy Hook Promise, what we'd like to do is start at the grassroots. So in the communities, speaking to the people on the ground, we will be bringing programs into communities where we can address a lot of these issues. Social isolation and bullying, and identify problems that are pre-existing or about to exist. And I think if you start right there, having those conversations at the community level, that will influence, hopefully, state policy, and we can work with the states at the state level at state policy. We've been doing that already with actually some pretty good success. And then I think that's going to flow upward, and eventually it's going to have to influence at the federal level.
Thanks, Mark. Chief, if you could have one thing that the American people could know about in terms of a fact or an item that is pressing in your mind as you deal with this issue every day, to put you on the spot a little bit, what would that item, what would that thing be? What is it that you would want every American citizen to know as you and your police force are fighting this every day? What is the thing that the American people should know?
They should know, and it's well-founded, we've used it, all of us have used it. Nearly 40% of all firearms are obtained outside a background check. It's like allowing 40% of people to go through a TSA airport checkpoint without a screening. Would we do that? Background checks will work. We know since 1994, the Brady Law, it's taken effect, nearly 2 million prohibited purchases of these weapons were stopped. And we know this will work. At gun shows and penny saver classified ads, background checks work, and they'll stop these 40% that are getting into the hands of people who should not have them. If they were lawfully able to obtain these weapons, they'd go into an FFL and acquire that device.
That's a great answer. Reverend, do you have something as well from the faith perspective that you would say, this is the thing that people need to know? And then secondly, I'd love for you to touch on the idea that you spoke about a little bit as well earlier, that this Washington gridlock can't be the thing that stops us. And what are the things that you can use to your advantage to make sure that that's not coming in the way?
I think today, after, like this morning with enough Fort Hood tragedy, the awareness is hitting us day in and day out. As a parent, that 2 a.m. phone call, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, where it says your son, G, has been shot. And so the awareness that guns kill and transform lives, the impact of not only of the loss of a loved one, but the loss of parents and the effects of the death on the loss of it from a child and siblings and the community at large, and what that child potential could have been. I think we have to continue to tell the story, the realism of the story, that these are lives. Unlike a movie where the actors get up and go home to $1 million house, our children don't get up. Your child is gone, like my child. And we have to continue to be aware of the issues of the community. We live in Pittsburgh, the most livable city, and I live in a city now, I believe, the new mayor, the foundation community, the faith-based community, grassroots organizations are coming together, and I think we can fix this solution. Employment's an issue, poverty is an issue, education is an issue, but I think if we all came to a table like this, I know it can be fixed. I know the number can be reduced. Another 10-year-old was shot this week in Pittsburgh, not this number, through a door, just like my son. I went up to the school because 2 young men were flexing, showing off their guns. These are kids, 16 and 17-year-old. It's illegal to have a gun. Where do the guns come from? This illegal store purchasing and no background checks and the mental health issue. We have to address, like she indicated, the why behind this. One thing we have to do as society is become more loving and more compassionate, understanding that a lot of these young people have a lot of issues and we can't brush it off, that it's a mental health component. When you take a life in front of cameras and know that you're losing your life also, that's a mental health issue, and it's something that we as a society must address.
So, Mayor Rawlings-Blake, Mayor Peduto, Mayor Emanuel, I know a number of your local elected leaders are certainly pressing the case here. Wondering, Sheen, if you can talk about maybe if you had a piece of advice, or what are the couple of things that local elected leaders throughout the country could do, could organize? What are some of the successes you've seen in Chicago dealing with the rampage that's going on?
I think my answer is not going to be too surprising. I think that the efforts to beef up the mental health resources and resources in general, especially to the at-risk communities, is paramount in the effort. I'm very happy that there is more of a push and a focus for that in the city of Chicago, and I feel very proud that I work for an organization that is, the solution for us is really twofold. It's, my piece is the crisis intervention, so when there is a crisis that somebody deems as a potential imminent risk of harm to someone's self or others, that we intervene at that point and we stabilize the situation and we figure out a safety plan for this person along with them and get them the services and the linkage that they need. So that's that piece, that's like the stopping the bleeding. But the second part of that, which is the more holistic part, it's the prevention effort. So it looks similar in that it is still coming, validating the story, coming up with safety plans, but it's before we get our children, our citizens into a place that they feel so not valuing their own life to the point that they don't care what happens, that they'll take a gun and they'll, flex and it doesn't matter what the outcome is. And in the internal world of that person is really insecure, not feeling a value for their own life or the life of others. And, there's a lot of prevention efforts happening that I'm very happy to be able to report on in terms of education programs, awareness building. There's, we all say it starts in the home. There's a family parenting education workshops. There's the mental health first aid, which is not for any of us, it's for private citizens who just want to learn more about how they can identify somebody who's in crisis and raise their hand and say, look, I'm worried about this person. So, in terms of the gridlock, I'm sure we can all be frustrated with that. At the same time, it has less bearing, I think, on what I do because we're out there doing it. Whether there's a lot of people supporting us or not, we're out there doing it because there's no other choice. If we're not out there figuring out a safer way to make decisions to cope with what's going on internally, then we might as well just live in a war zone.
Thanks, Nosheen. I think we'd like to open it up for audience Q&A. I know we have an audience made up of a number of experts, made up of folks that have been touched and affected by this issue. So if you have questions or comments for our champions, would love to take those at this point. And also would invite Congressman Barber, if you do have any words that you'd like to say, we'd be happy to have you as well.